As a cardiovascular dietitian, I see this mistake every single day. Patients eating heart-healthy foods that are actually feeding arterial plaque. If you want clean arteries, you must eliminate these 5 foods immediately. Did you know that certain foods can cause the body to make too much of a waxy substance called cholesterol? Cholesterol can combine with fat, calcium, and other substances in the blood to form plaque. Plaque then slowly builds up and hardens in the arteries, causing them to narrow. This buildup of plaque, a condition called atherosclerosis, can lead to heart disease, heart attack, and stroke. According to the American Heart Association, 1 in 3 adults has heart disease. Additionally, 103 million Americans have high blood pressure, which increases their risk of a heart attack or stroke. If you chose the avocado, you're absolutely right. This is definitely the first food that I believe everyone should incorporate into their diet to help prevent a heart attack. Studies have shown that eating just half an avocado twice a week can reduce your risk of death from a heart attack by up to 16%, and it can also lower your risk of arterial plaque buildup by a significant 21%. But what makes avocados so special? Well, they're packed with amazing nutrients. Just look at that list. A whole bunch of essential vitamins and minerals, choline, and lots of those wonderful healthy fats. Avocados can help lower your triglycerides, a type of fat in your blood, and increase your HDL, the good cholesterol. Both of these things are super important for avoiding heart attacks. But, as I mentioned earlier, even avocados have their downsides. First off, they can be quite pricey, especially with tariffs and political issues affecting their availability. You might remember the avocado crisis in Texas back in 2022, when guacamole became a luxury item during the Super Bowl. Second, they can go bad incredibly quickly. All right, everyone, welcome back to the Cardiac Health Crew. This is where our awesome team of heart doctors, that's cardiologists, and super smart blood pressure experts, who are certified hypertension educators, share simple, real-world tips to help you live your absolute best life. Think of us as your go-to guide for all things heart-related content. Please give that like button a big thumbs up, and to make sure you don't miss any future health gems, hit that subscribe button and tap the little bell icon so you're always in the know. We're curious to hear from you. Are you even a little bit interested in learning more about blood pressure and keeping your heart healthy? If the answer is yes, drop a 1 in the comments below. If it's not really on your mind right now, no worries at all, just type a 0. Your feedback is super valuable because it helps us understand what topics you find most helpful, so we can create more of what you love. Let's get started now. A perfectly ripe avocado can turn mushy and lose its nutrients and flavor in just a couple of days. And let's be honest, a lot of people just don't like avocados to begin with. They have that unique waxy texture, and they're definitely an acquired taste for many of us. I didn't like them at first either, but I learned to enjoy them by consistently trying them. Now, if you want fresh avocados because they spoil so fast, that often means multiple trips to the grocery store each week. And then there's a more serious issue, a darker side to the avocado industry. It seems that exploitation is sometimes involved, with poor working conditions, unfair wages for workers, and even instances of child labor. You know, where there's money, unfortunately, there can also be conflict and abuse. So, what can we do about this? First, the problem of freshness. The industry recognized this issue and came up with a solution: plastic vacuum packs. These packs can keep avocados fresh for weeks, especially if you store them in the fridge. Now, you've probably heard the saying, every solution creates a whole new problem. Well, here's the next one with that plastic packaging, microplastics. So, again, lots of challenges, but I still eat avocados. Here's what I do. I try to eat them as often as I can despite these problems. I enjoy some slices or guacamole on bacon and salads, sometimes with beans. I buy fresh avocados when I can find good ones, and I just cut them in half and scoop out the flesh with a spoon. I also try to buy a mix of ripe and unripe avocados, so I have some that will last a few days longer, especially when kept in the fridge. As for the ethical concerns, I honestly don't have a perfect solution. If you live near a farm, you might be able to source them more ethically. You can try looking for local farms if that's an option for you. Okay, enough about avocados for now. Let's move on to the next heart-healthy food. How about yogurt? Specifically, Greek yogurt versus kefir. If you chose Greek yogurt, you might be partly right and partly wrong at the same time. In the past, I made the same choice for years. It was my go-to breakfast. But let me explain. A lot of commercial Greek yogurts can be deceiving. Once you actually look at the nutrition labels, you often find that many Greek yogurts, especially the ones marketed as healthy low-fat options, actually replace the fat with a lot of added sugar. That's the exact opposite of what we need, and they can also contain other chemicals from food processing. Now, Greek yogurt can be really healthy. There's evidence that it can improve important markers like glucose, blood sugar, triglycerides, and cholesterol. So, I'm going to say that both healthy Greek yogurt and healthy kefir, as well as other fermented foods like natto and kimchi, are great choices. My personal favorite go-to is actually sauerkraut. You can find more detailed discussions about natto and kimchi in some of our other videos. And if you're wondering about fermented foods in general, here's the basic idea. Fermentation is a process where yeast and bacteria break down sugars. Fermented foods are those that have gone through this controlled microbial growth. Greek yogurt and kefir are fermented milk products, where colonies of yeast and bacteria consume the sugars in the milk. Kimchi is a Korean dish made from fermented vegetables, mostly cabbage and radish. Natto is fermented soybeans, and sauerkraut is fermented cabbage. Evidence shows that fermented foods can improve cardiovascular risk markers, reduce inflammation, and lower the risk of heart attacks. So, what's so special about fermented foods? There's a key player that we haven't really talked about yet, that's involved in heart attacks and strokes, and it's called the gut microbiome. You see, inside our intestines, we have about 1 trillion bacteria. So when you eat, you're not just eating for yourself, you're eating for 1 trillion little helpers. These microbes are more important than you might think. They help produce various vitamins and nutrients. They protect your body from harmful bacteria. And they help with fat metabolism and something called neurotransmitters. Remember that beautiful garden we talked about earlier? That's your gut microbiome. We're literally walking around with a garden inside us, and we need to take care of it. Every time you eat processed junk food, it's like setting fire to all the healthy bacteria and watering the weeds. We call that dysbiosis. Dysbiosis is the overgrowth of unhealthy bacteria and other microorganisms. It's very common in people with prediabetes and diabetes, and it can lead to inflammation, arterial plaque buildup, and ultimately heart attacks. That's why fermented foods are so good for preventing heart attacks. When you eat fermented foods, you're feeding the good bacteria, promoting anti-inflammatory effects, and helping your body produce healthy micronutrients. You're watering your garden and getting rid of the weeds, and in the process, potentially escaping a heart attack. But just like with avocados, there can be problems with fermented foods too. First, similar to commercial Greek yogurt, some other fermented foods like kefir or kombucha can have a lot of added sugar. Often, sugar is added back after the fermentation process. Why would they do that? Well, fermented foods can be an acquired taste. Most people don't grow up naturally liking their sour or tangy flavors. While the fermentation process does consume some of the sugar, sometimes more is added to make them more palatable. The second problem is amines. Amines are compounds related to ammonia and proteins. Examples include histamine and tyramine. You might not have heard of putrescine or cadaverine, but yes, those can be present as well. These last two are actually what give rotten food its distinctive smell, and sometimes you can detect a hint of that in fermented foods. When amines are consumed in excess, they can potentially mix with nitric oxide in the body and turn into nitrosamines, which have been linked to cancer in some research. Some studies suggest that certain fermented foods might have high levels of amines. However, this is really more true for certain types of fermented foods like fermented fish, red meat, and some aged cheeses like mish, a salty Egyptian cheese, and parmesan, rather than in kefir, kimchi, or Greek yogurt. Another potential issue is salt. You might have heard that a large amount of salt can increase your blood pressure. While there might be some truth to that, and it's been the prevailing wisdom for decades, newer research is starting to suggest that insulin might actually be a bigger culprit than sodium itself. This means that the sodium found in fermented foods like natto, kefir, and sauerkraut might not be as big of a concern as you might think. Another problem some people experience is bloating, gas, or even diarrhea after eating fermented foods. In my opinion, this often has more to do with the changes happening in their gut microbiome. People who have dysbiosis, that imbalance of unhealthy bacteria, are more likely to experience these symptoms, but they are usually temporary as your gut adjusts. If you're thinking, gosh, this sounds like too many potential problems, slow down for a moment. Let me tell you what I do. I'm careful to read labels. If I buy kefir at the store, I avoid it if it smells overly sour or rancid, or if it has a lot of clumping or clear liquid separated in it. This also applies if you make your own kefir. I often use a good quality kefir starter powder, and as I said, I eat a lot of sauerkraut, and I often enjoy it with some pecorino romano cheese and a little butter. I love it. Now, back to the amines. Remember those? They can be a problem for some people who have allergies to these types of compounds. But true, amine allergies are not that common. I recommend introducing fermented foods slowly and in small portions, maybe once or twice a week, and gradually increasing the amount. This can help avoid bloating or gas. Let me know in the comments if you've tried any of these fermented foods and, if so, how you incorporate them into your diet. I used to eat Greek yogurt for breakfast every single day for years, and it turned out that the yogurts I liked had way too much added sugar. I stopped eating them for years, but with the growing evidence supporting the benefits of fermented foods, I'm starting to include them again, choosing healthier, unsweetened options. Let's move on to another quick quiz. Which one would you choose for your heart health? A processed protein bar or a handful of nuts? Just to continue the trend of misleading labels, there are a lot of unhealthy protein bars out there that are loaded with sugar and preservatives. I'm not saying to never eat a protein bar. There are some good options available, but the majority of them are not ideal. For this one, I have to go with nuts, pun absolutely intended. Research has consistently shown a decrease in the risk of heart attacks associated with regular nut consumption. The best options include almonds, hazelnuts, Brazil nuts, walnuts, pistachios, and even peanuts, which are technically legumes, but are often grouped with nuts. My personal favorites, my go-to nuts, are walnuts, almonds, and especially macadamia nuts, and most of all, pecans. I live in the southeastern U.S., and pecans are grown here, so I can get and enjoy a lot of them. Macadamia nuts and pecans are also very, very good for those following a low-carb diet. So, why are nuts in general so beneficial for heart attack prevention? Well, they contain plenty of beneficial components, from healthy fats and omega-3 fatty acids to fiber, plant sterols, choline, and even L-arginine. L-arginine is an amino acid that's well known for helping the body produce nitric oxide, which in turn helps open up blood vessels, reduce blood pressure, and boost overall vascular health. You might have guessed by now that there can be some downsides to going completely nuts all the time. Some people have reported bloating, weight gain, and even a risk of selenium poisoning from eating too many Brazil nuts. So yes, nuts have their own potential dark side. For example, the cashew nut industry has been linked to the exploitation of workers in some regions like Kenya. So, let's address these concerns quickly. Bloating can actually be a side effect of improvement in your gut microbiome. Nuts can help build those healthy bacteria and a healthy gut environment. Is it possible to gain weight from eating nuts? You've probably heard people say, "Oh, if I eat too many nuts, I'll gain weight." They're just fat bombs. But ask those people what else they're eating. You usually don't hear that complaint from someone who's following a low-carb or keto diet. Most people tend to blame the healthy fats in nuts while neglecting to mention the large amounts of sugar they're also consuming. Now let's talk about selenium and cyanide. Selenium poisoning is a real concern if you overdo it on Brazil nuts. I wouldn't recommend eating more than 2 Brazil nuts in a single day. Cyanide poisoning from almonds is less likely to be a significant issue if you eat them in moderation. Maybe limit yourself to around 10 to 15 almonds per day. Again, selenium and cyanide are unlikely to be problems if you're eating a reasonable amount of a variety of nuts. If you really love cashew nuts, try to be mindful of ethical sourcing. Personally, I don't eat a lot of cashews because I haven't found a reliable way to ensure they're ethically sourced here. I mostly get walnuts from a trusted source. I eat a lot of them and prefer raw walnuts, but dry roasted ones are fine too. Just not my usual choice. Definitely avoid any sugar-coated walnuts or other types of processed nuts. Now, there's one more food that boasts even more omega-3 fatty acids than many nuts. It's a food I've recommended for years, and one that I've come to really appreciate even more since I shifted from a low-fat to a low-carb diet. So, we have another quick decision to make. Don't think about it too long. Apples or salmon? If you chose apples, let me tell you, years ago I probably would have picked that too. I like them. They're nice and sweet and have a satisfying crunch. Plus, we used to hear, "An apple a day keeps the doctor away," right? So they had to be healthy. Well, there's a bit of a problem with that. Despite all their nutrients, apples actually contain a significant amount of sugar. They don't have enough fiber to really counteract that sugar load. And I'm not saying to never eat apples. I might have a slice or two a month, but I definitely don't eat a lot of them. If you do eat apples, it's best to pair them with some fiber or protein before, and maybe even check your glucose levels afterward. And definitely avoid drinking apple juice. It's almost pure fructose and is very similar to drinking non-diet sodas. The same thing, unfortunately, applies to oranges and most other fruits. But we're not comparing apples and oranges here. We're comparing apples and salmon, and in this case, salmon is the clear winner. Okay, I know salmon can be expensive. I recognize that, which is why I'll give you a couple of more affordable alternatives in a few minutes. But why even consider salmon or other fish in the first place? Well, just eating fish has been shown to reduce the risk of cardiovascular death by about 5%, and that benefit increases for every 5 grams you eat, especially for fish that are high in omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-3 fatty acids are some of the healthiest fats you can consume. They include Geek Alert, EPA, eicosapentaenoic acid, DHA, docosahexaenoic acid, I still stumble over that one, and a third one, ALA, alpha-linolenic acid. We've mentioned ALA before when we were talking about nuts, and we'll touch on it again later. These omega-3 fatty acids have been found to be very protective for your cardiovascular health. So, which fish has the most omega-3s? If you guessed something like tuna or swordfish, you might be partially right. They are high in omega-3s. However, they are followed closely by salmon, with around 2.5 milligrams per 100 grams. Kippers, or kipper herring, have almost as much as salmon, and sardines come in at around 1.6 milligrams. So, wait a minute. I said salmon was the winner. What's the problem with tuna or swordfish? If you don't know what's healthy to eat, look for the characteristics that we just described that made up this list. The patterns: low carbs, higher fats. To know more about arterial plaque, how to find it, and how to prevent it, check out how I reversed my own plaque right here.